Hello and welcome to the podcast. It is Marketing Matters, and this is Rich Harshaw here with Dustin Rhoades from Great Day Home Improvements. Dustin, how you doing today?
Good, man. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I've got a person that works for me named Mary Beth, whose job it is to round up people for this podcast. And she said, "Hey, I've got a really interesting, great person for you." I said, "Oh, really? Who's that?" She told me who you were, and I did not realize. Uh, Look, a lot of people have been around the industry for a lot of time, but you've literally been around the industry. The number of places and the amount of experience you have is phenomenal. Before we get into the discussion, I want to focus in on your book, Dumb Tax, talking about hiring. But give us a little background on you because it's quite impressive.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, Rich. Thanks for having me, number one. Mary did a great job hunting me down to make sure we were here today. But real quick, industry veteran, been in the industry approximately 25 years now. So it's crazy to think that it's gone that long. I think that's where all my hair went, was kind of learning the dumb tax through the industry, right? So I kind of started out at Pacesetter Corp. Was where I started my career, cutting out on a 10-step process, having that beat in my head as a young guy. And then left Pacesetter Corp. I went to work with a company called Jubilee. We actually got bought out by Home Depot, worked with some good guys there, learned a little bit about acquisitions. And then we left there, worked for another bath company, and ended up getting involved in the next step of my life after we took another company public. We got worked with Champion, which is actually now part of the Great Day family. Worked with them for about 9.5 years under a gentleman named Ed Levine that literally would brutally beat you up on Saturday morning, having to sit there with your financial and going through every line item. So it taught you the areas of how to really pay attention to your business. And I call it an MBA in Ed Levineville, which I think most of us would know if you came from that area, is one heck of a scholarship, right? So left Champion after being there about 9.5 years. Worked with some great people, Earl Ron, Matt Colligan, a lot of strong players in the industry. A lot of them have gotten their businesses purchased, which is kind of cool. From there, left, was VP of sales over Home Depot, worked there for a short period of time, then got recruited by Renewal by Anderson in Dallas, Texas. Went from there, took that branch. We went from like 8 million to right around the $70 million mark in just about 3.5 years. Went and worked with the Burner Group out of St. Louis, another RBA. Love Paul and team. They're absolutely killing it now still, just like they always are. I think the Burner Group's doing, geez, I don't know, $100 million out of that big boy. And then we look at St. Louis is where I transferred over, or not St. Louis, excuse me, San Diego, which is where I'm at now, is where I transferred and worked with Dreamstyle. And at that part, they were part of RBA. We took that branch from 13 to 27 million our first year, and then I had to rebuild the whole brand. We got that up to about 63 million. And I ended up leaving when we did the merger, got purchased out by the Renovo Group, and I had taken my toys and went and played in another pond. I was at the top 500, and I ran into the great Michael Hoy, legend himself, and then Ed, the president of all Great Day, and they recruited me in to kind of work for them, and we had worked out the magic. Now I've been here as started out with Great Day. You're looking at patio enclosure and K Designer. Correct, helped with sharpening the saw a little bit in there with systems and processes, and then I got promoted up to SVP of sales over Great Day. So it's where we kind of set right here, right now. And back in 2002, one other thing you talk about the book, when COVID happened, ended up writing a book called Dumb Tax, and it took me forever. And I heard that saying a long time ago. This guy named Michael I worked with said, "Man, I freaking just paid some dumb tax." And I remember it, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, dude, that's the best dang thing I've ever heard," right? So I took that name, and I was trying to figure out how to name it because when you're writing a book, you find about 10 or 10 different names, and I finally came on the name Dumb Tax, and then Find Your Wife for Hiring because um, it just really fell in my pocket how we wrote it, and spent about 2 years writing it, getting it detailed, and end up putting it out. And it's pretty nerve-wracking putting your own book out, because criticism, that type of stuff. But it turned out to be pretty good, and it's helped a lot of people in the business thus far. So it's kind of a long story, but kept it in a short
Now,
period of time, right?
I know you're in San Diego now, and I know Great Day is out of Ohio, so you clearly are working remotely. But I'm gonna guess that for the majority of your career, remote working was not an option. And so have you just moved around that much?
Yeah, I did. Absolutely. As a young guy, man, you were chasing the dollar, right? Trying to figure out where your next dollar was going to be and how to grow into your careers, right? So kind of, moved it up and, my poor wife, had, been on the back and, pushing her, taking her to Texas and, all over the place. And now she's told me that over the next several years when our kids are graduating high school that we are not moving. And I kind of had made that part of the pretense when we moved here. But I get out and travel, get to see all the teams now. It's really fun. But I tell you what, San Diego, once you live here, really hard to go anyplace else. So it's a
Yeah,
gorgeous
I'm
place to
aware.
live.
I've been there many times, speaking at conferences, mostly things like that, and it's amazing. Well, let's talk about dumb tax in a little bit more detail. Clearly, you know what you're talking about, and I say that because not because I know you super well, I don't, uh, but you don't become the SVP of sales for Great Day Home Improvement because you're pretty good at what you do. You become the SVP of sales because you're freaking amazing at what you do. Clearly, your resume shows that. Is sales has that been your forte throughout your career, or is there other areas of expertise within the home improvement industry?
Well, sales is what I'm known for. That's kind of the whole where the background came from. But realistically, I understand both sides of the business, and I think that made me understand and be a better operator when it comes to a whole business, not just the sales. Because I feel like that you get the promise makers and promise keepers, right? So if you don't set the promise keepers up right with the promise makers, again, then there creates friction, and then that's bad culture, right? So back in the day, remember I talked about the Ed Levine School of Management, I call it. He used to force us to take like the VSI certification, installation masters, all those things, so that way people could not pull the wool over your eyes when it came to approving bills and resources and getting deep into your financials. So I'd say that yeah, sales I'm definitely stronger at, but I have a general understanding of the entire business, and I would tell you there's probably nothing in this business I haven't done based on the ability of not wanting anyone to be able to throw the wool over my eyes. But sales definitely and leadership and building team building is that's what I say my huge strength is there.
So, what do you spend your time on at Great Day in that role of SVP? Are you uh, bringing in people to train? Are you creating systems? What is that job? Obviously, there's a lot of things involved, but like, what is kind of the high level main things that you're working on there?
Well, it's, first off, I think each brand, and trust me, the culture at Great Day is phenomenal, right? So we've got our 10 commandments, and I look at it in each brand as their, as an entity. I always say this term, I call it row the boat, right? We're all rowing the boat, right? Same vision, same process. Trying to keep the same speed, right? Because we all have the same goal. And when we're talking about that goal and alignment is making sure that each brand is it's operating at the level it needs to, right? So one of the things I look at is like systems and processes. One of the things I talk about in the book called you can manage a system and process, you can't manage chaos, right? And if my life is managing people, my life becomes hell. If it's managing process, my life is easy, but that's easier said than done. So you figure out, where there's I call it execution issues or systemic issues, right? I learned this category. I call it the four tiers of efficiency, and I pay deep a close to the four tiers of efficiency. I speak it all the time, right? It's like tier one's your mission criticals. It's like your revenue producing, right? It's things that you have to do on the day-to-day basis to move the needle, right? Too many people live in what we call the tier four, right? Skipping from tier one to tier four here, which is other people's priorities that steal their limelight or ability, and it robs their time, right? My wife, she's a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, right? So I stole this line from her, and I have to give her credit because if I didn't, she'd come kick me in the shin. But it says, time is my currency. Your lack of preparation is killing my currency, and I will not allow you to bankrupt me, right? So if you think of that statement, right, it talks about time management, how important it is, and things that steal your time really you can't get any time back, right? And a lot of the times where I see efficiencies happening in most businesses, just because they're focused too much in the tier fours, which I call the firefighter hat. And if you've been in the remodeling industry, you find that a lot of people live what I call the hamster wheel or Groundhog Day, where every day repeats the same day every single day, and they don't feel like they're so tired and so worn out, but they really don't get anything done. They're not grabbing traction, right? So that's where we get out of the tier fours. And I have this rule: if you have two tier fours that attack you in a week, then you need to you got to write it down, and then you put a little checkbox next to it, and then you have to what you call schedule we call a tier two block, which is a SOP block, right? And SOPs are those things that obviously that high standard operating procedure. I call it turn by turn GPS to success. Because if you don't have that, then again you are putting yourself in a position to fail, and you have no time for your tier three blocks, which is the time you schedule to work on the business and not in it. Right. And a lot of people realize they don't have time to grow their business because they're too busy fighting fires in their business. So I'm looking for that, right? And each time we run into challenges, there's still time. Two questions: is it a systemic issue or an execution issue? And if it's one of the two, the system's failing the business or the people are failing the business, but on the execution issue side, you got to figure out which one it is, because then you have to figure out where you need to tighten and then how to approach it moving forward. So again, you remove that challenge out of the business. So that's
Okay. All right. That was a lot. Okay. So let's break this down a little bit. So I was making notes here. If I got them right, here's the four tiers: mission critical stuff, day to day revenue generation, I think is what you said.
yep.
Number two, SOPs, turn by turn, GPS to success. Block three or phase three, whatever you want to call it. Time to schedule to work on the business. And then four is other people's priorities, firefighting, hamster wheel. Is that right?
Perfect. Absolutely.
Okay.
You're quick learn. That's
I'm
amazing.
good. I'm a quick writer. I don't know that I learned anything, but I wrote things down. Is it, by the way, I want to make sure that we're keeping semi on track here. Is this stuff that's all in the book, I'm assuming?
These
Okay.
are these are yeah, these are things that allow you to, it's like a guide map, right? And I feel
Okay.
like everything's got to be a map.
Okay. So let's go through this then a little bit, because it seems like it would be easy for rookie, I'll call them managers for lack of a better word, to confuse tier four things for tier one things.
Yeah.
Like, and then basically not even really paying attention to two and three. Like,
Hmm.
I'm spending all my time fighting fires that I perceive are revenue generating things or revenue inhibiting things that I'm trying to, put the fire out. Did I get that right? Does that seem like typical of a less experienced manager?
Oh, absolutely. It's I call it the mushy middle, right? So you talk about the mushy middle, which is like your middle management, which generally could be like the backbone of the entire business, right? It could be like the middle. So that's like I call it your sales leadership. A lot of times they were put in positions that sometimes they're not ready for, and this is probably industry wide. I could pretty much go into any business and any sector in the company or in the country, and you probably find the same thing, right? Some guy that was a good sales rep, they got promoted into a manager before he was ready. So that what they perceive to be a problem, like let's say it's paperwork, right? So they're constantly chasing down paperwork or deposits or financing or other things that are going on to them. They spend their entire day working on those things when they don't realize that those things are failing because they're not either executed properly from the system, or literally they're allowing it to be created because the system's failing the people. So there's one or two things in there when you're looking at it, that a lot of times the problem that the manager is dealing with is self-created, and they're
Okay. And
not
again, to
realizing.
my previous point, then they might look at that in that example. I'm chasing down deposits. I'm doing paperwork. What are you talking about, Dustin? This is mission critical stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's created mission critical because it's a fire, right? If you don't take care of the job, then it's going to cancel, or basically it's going to fall off the wagon, right? And that's those are things that, fortunately people look at it that way, is that's what the job of them is, but it's completely wrong. How do you grow the business if you're constantly fighting fires? Can't do it, right? You become
Now,
unscalable.
do you have to go to stage three or tier three, schedule time to work on the business to create tier two SOPs? Because that seems like a fruit of taking time to work on the business. Or is it considered
Well,
a different thing?
well, tier two is like a timeout. right? That's like taking a timeout. Like you're in trouble. It's almost like detention. So detention for the rep, right? So if you or for the manager, just figure if you can't get anything done because all you're doing is constantly working, constantly working on the problems, then again you can't. So you have to. And that's when I said why you have to have discipline. If you don't have discipline to, correct to basically manage your time, because remember, time is my currency, and if I don't take care of that currency, your lack of preparation is killing it, and you will get bankrupted if you allow that to happen, right? So again, you've got to they have to schedule that time on their calendar to make sure they're working on what's going to fix the business, not working on making the business better, right? So the difference of a tier two is you're working on things to fix the business, not grow the business, right? So tier three would be working on things like adding, Sierra, Rilla, basically whatever tech type stuff you'd be looking at trying to add, which is going to add to and increase the business. This is just trying to fix what you already have. That's what tier
Okay.
two is, right?
So we could call tier two fixing and tier three growing almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's go back to tier one for a minute because I gave you some ideas of what I thought tier one was not, and people might be doing tier four things, thinking they're doing tier one things. What does a tier one look like if you're doing it right, so to speak?
Well, it's working on, again, it's revenue producing, right? Whether it's working on training with your teams, it's capacity management, right? Understanding, it's basically performance management, things like that we work on with the teams to increase basically the throughput, right? Maybe it's rehash, whatever it is you're working on with your teams that again is building revenue. If it's not building backlog, then basically you're tearing down backlog, right? So a whole reason there is sales, right, is to build a clean backlog, right? So there's four levers of of a clean backlog. Is it measurable, orderable, installable, collectible, and then your fifth one, if you want to add a fifth one, is profitable, right? It's got to, so when you're looking at those areas, you've got to figure out what you're managing. You got to define it, right? And that's that's another thing which isn't really part of the book, but reread if you haven't read the book in a while. The four basically obsessions of extraordinary executive, right? Is that organizational clarity. I think a lot of businesses fail on that, right? They can't define success. Like if you looked at what success looks like at the end of the customer journey, how do you define success? And I
So
think
how
a
do you
lot of
define
people,
success at grade day? What is so let's be specific here. And then keep in mind, I want you to answer this second, but first answer, how do you define it? And then give me an example of what a poorly defined organizational clarity statement would look like.
okay, that's fair, right? So again, hopefully I don't get in trouble for that. I'm just kidding. What we call, because Grade Day is an enterprise, right? If we've got 12 different brands that work underneath us. So this is something that right now we've got this cool leadership thing. We've got all the leaders in the country coming together. They're working in these pods that are helping us work on even strengthening the business more. So one of the things I tell you is we're trying to create what we call a great day customer for life. It's one of those things that was the mission of is create a great day customer life because we have so many verticals and so many products and so many offerings that if we just sell them one time, we just happily involve them one time. I hear the word sell. We just happily involve them one time and we let them go off, then they're going to go other places and look for other remodeling projects. We want to keep them where we keep it sticky with the customer. So where they keep coming back and buying other product lines from us through our different brands. So again, we keep that customer for life, almost like our own aggregator through it. So that's kind of the nature on that. If you get down to the brand level, I think there has to be a throughput, right? So a lot of people think it's talking about what their product does, right, or what they call their mission benefit. Like you could take some people that talk about, we want to, become the most profitable home improvement company in the country. Cool. Okay. But after you do that, then what? So if I look at that, if I want to be, customer centric, cool. What does that mean? Right. So if you define it, how do you define something that somebody can get their hands on and get motivated to want to be part of? So you think about it, right? What would make you want to join a mission and what would make you want to row the boat to success and what does success look like, right?
Yeah.
So when you're looking at defining it, I've got the one that I talk about all the time, which is exceeding expectations of self, company, and customer. Because if you check all three boxes, Well, technically that's a win. And if you're exceeding expectations, I think that's what everybody shows up to work for, is to, again, no one ever shows up thinking they're going to do a bad job on purpose. No one does that. So yeah, I think if you
Yeah.
exceed expectation yourself, your company, your customer, I think that defines success in a way that simplifies it. It's easy to grab a hold of and people understand it.
This reminds me, I was listening to a podcast recently, and the guy was talking about the fallacy of be do have. He says there really is no such thing as be do have, which is a pretty common like motivational type trope. And he says here's why it doesn't exist, because if you say you want to be something, you can actually define whatever that thing is that you're being by specific actions. And then he gave an example. And the example was, if you want to be better at sales, you need to learn how to be charismatic. So the goal would be, I want to be charismatic. Okay, well,
Mm,
how do you be charismatic? And then he says, you can break it down into a dozen sub things. When you walk into a room, make eye contact, shake hands with people, remember people's names, and several things like that. So
mm.
if you give somebody an instruction, be charismatic, I'm not really sure what that means. But if I tell them when you walk into the room, shake hands, make eye contact, ask people their names, remember their name, use their name, smile. Okay, now I'm being charismatic by doing things. And I think I'm hearing you say something very similar here. It's like, hey, we want to be a profitable company. We want to be customer centric. No, no, no. What specifically are you doing that's evidence of that? Let's make that the goal or the objective, and then we can actually measure against that.
Absolutely. Right. I love it. Like Nike, just do it. How simple is that? Right. So it's when you get into areas like that. I know, I remember the top 500 a couple of years ago, they were talking about having the brand, talking about how to build your brand. Right. And every year, generally somebody comes on there talking about that brand awareness. It's, it's, it's a cool thing to think about it. Cause, just like the theory, right. On the four obsessions, right. So number one, cohesive leadership. Number two, clarity. Number three is, once you figure out what your clarity, how do you overmanage it? Right? How do you overmanage that organizational clarity where you repeat it over and over and over again? And then number four is checking your checking your human systems, right? And making sure that they're not creating bottlenecks. So again, you can get to your end goal in mind. Because you're not
Yeah,
managing the systems. That's a big
you
deal.
reference these four obsessions. I think you said it was a book. What book is that? I didn't catch it.
Oh, Four Obsessions of Extraordinary Executive. It's
Oh, okay. That's
yeah,
actually the name
yeah.
of the book.
Yep. It's a fantastic book. Yeah, and it's one that I try to reread once a year because it reminds me of just putting yourself in the situation of what's important, right? Because we get in these things where if everything's important, nothing is. It's a huge deal. It's kind of like, you know, not to pivot, but we talk about the book Dumb Tax is, if you begin with the end in mind, right? So what is the cost of bad hire? Have you ever had anyone do that math for you at all? Cost of bad hire? You take a sales professional.
I could imagine what it is. I don't know that I've gone through the exercise. Why don't you help us out?
Okay. What do you think it might be? This is fun story.
The math of a bad hire, like if you handed me an invoice for how much the bad hire cost, what would the total bill be?
Yeah. What do you think?
Are we talking a salesperson?
Yeah.
$80,000 be my guess.
Okay. Pretty close. Pretty close. Depends on the industry, right? But we've done some research, and I've
Yeah.
done. This is actually the last chapter of the book where it gives you what it was in one of my businesses, and actually give you a worksheet of what you would fill out on all the different items. And what we found is it's anywhere between 160,000 up to over 300,000 plus,
Okay,
just
so
for
I
one
was
bad
low.
hire. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Oh, look.
I just my back of the napkin math is factoring in not just the training time, which is not nothing, and whatever base salary you give them, but I'm thinking more in terms of leads that they blow.
Yeah. Boy, absolutely. And that's one
That's
thing. If
like
you take
to
your
me the
you
biggest
take your
one.
Yeah, you take your average yield or NSLI or RPL, depending on what you call it in your business, and you times that by, because you got to figure out, most bad hires you keep on staff for anywhere close to 90 days, right? We're like, hey, they
Yeah.
didn't really make it this month. Let's give them another shot, right? And one of the things that it should be kind of scary, if you take a lead cost, let's say it's just $500, right? You're doing decent at a $500 lead cost, right? Well, if I give you five leads, that's like $2,500, right? So I always take it if you take your yield. So if I got a $5,000 yield, that means I would need to bring $25,000 in the business to be have a profitable rep here, right? So
Yeah.
I know I'm willing to take down based on my benchmarks. But if you take that aspect, now you take 5 leads. I always joke around with my managers and I said, if you handed me $2,500 of your money, and I told you I was going to bring you back 25,000, I said, and I paid you back zero, would you give me another 2,500 bucks?
No.
Why not?
Well, a bad investment.
Well, let's say I'm really good, Rich, and I'm able to talk you into giving me another five or another basic 2,500 bucks. So now you gave me 5 grand, right? And after that 5 grand, I told you I'm going to bring you $50,000 back as I promised you. But let's say I brought you nothing. Would you give me another 2,500?
The question is so absurd. I'm not even sure where you're going with it.
Well, exactly right. Because again, that's over 10, right?
Yeah.
How many sales reps on your staff, if you're looking down your number, are over 10? Right. So again, lead distribution is one of those things that's a tier one we talk about. Because if I give the same rep 90 leads and then they crap the bed on the 90 leads, and instead of giving that to a performer, I know you got to train people, but if I gave it to one of my performers that were averaging at my company average, you'll find that you are just bleeding money
Yeah.
out of the bottom, not counting just all the man hours and all the stuff that you can put a tangible cost on. That's what I call the intangible.
Yeah. So when I said 80,000, my back of the napkin math is probably thinking in terms of hard costs. Like I paid for leads, here they are, and you blew them. But the opportunity cost is where it gets to the 300,000 or even more because they should have
Correct.
been
Yeah,
bringing revenue into the company that they're not.
100%. Yeah. So it's like when you look at that number and if you tell every manager, right, you're responsible for managing that portfolio. We're giving you the marketing budget right in your hands. You need to turn this into gold, right? So that's why, when you put your budgets out, if it's a $4,000 SLI, whatever it might be, that's why you're managing to a budget, right? If you're just throwing crap on the wall and seeing what sticks, obviously your business is going to be in trouble in a short period of time. But it makes things fun when you're looking at it. That's why I talk about a bad hire, which kind of where it starts into like the process on how to get it, right? Because if you look at sourcing, we look at basic interview techniques, we look at, how to read eyes in an interview. There's multiple different things to figure out the learning type of how people learn. And we realize that a lot of times we want to hire people like ourselves. We want to hire people that learn the same way as we do. And then what happens is, whether you realize or not, right? If you think about in school, how many kids were in school that didn't do well in school because they were taught the wrong way, right?
Yeah.
And you think about it, right? We have audio, we got visual, we got kinesthetic type learners. And a lot of times the people that didn't do well in school were auditory learners, but they're being taught visually or being taught kinesthetically, and their brain didn't pick that up. There was no stories, there were nothing in there that happens. And kind of funny, when I was writing the book, I told this story about this guy who worked for me in Dallas, and this guy, he knew everything about the industry. I was like, why isn't this guy writing like 300,000 a month? He knows more than I do. It's insane. But he came in. I did a ride along with him once, and I saw him. He kept everything in his bag. He used no visual aids. He told a lot of stories. Could get them involved with his words. But the problem was he sat there for like an hour and a half, just spitting knowledge on them, and they couldn't retain anything he was saying because they're visual learners. So he was teaching the customers the way he learned, which wasn't the right way they learn. So therefore, it
Yeah.
put him at a deficit, which is why he wasn't performing. So just realize that, we think of things in our brain and we try to relate it to what we know in our knowledge base. And then your habits end up killing you because or killing your performance because we're thinking that we've got our crystal ball, right? And it's a little more difficult. So the book is designed to take you through and teach you what your why is on hiring a person. It's like, with disc profiles, we talk about the interview techniques, how to dress it and get yourself in how to basically undress your candidate down to their underwear sitting in front of you, because that you can really figure out who you have before you even put them in a disc profile, right? So there's some great techniques in there that I found that people have utilized that have made a big difference in their business.
Do you have a copy of the book, Andy?
Somewhere I do in my car probably.
Well, because here's what I was going to ask you. And look, I've written books but I know that if I don't have the book right in front of me, I don't necessarily remember every last thing that was in it. I was going to ask you to just flip through the book and give us two or three high level important nuggets out of the book to give
Well, I
people a
can.
feel and a flavor for it. Hopefully to get them to want to go buy the book. I assume it's available on Amazon. If it's not, that would be really bad.
No, it is on Amazon and Audible. As if you like the Audible version, we got that as well. So a couple of things. There's two areas, right? Number one, I always talk about the very beginning of the book. We talk about this statement: elephants don't bite, mosquitoes do. Right. So it's one of the what the parable means is, it's not the big things that bite you in business, it's the small ones that you're not thinking of. Right. So it's like kind of like we talked about in the area, the way that we interview. Are we interviewing from a position of need or a position of being on purpose, right? If I'm not on purpose with my hiring, then I'm managing out of position of need, which means I do slot filling. So one of the things that the book tells about is about how to like sit down, pretty much take a disc profile, reverse engineer it, and figure out how we're looking at the candidate from what the needs of the business are. Because every business is a little different, right? I might be a premium type company. I might be a value-based brand. I might have, I might think things are a little bit different. So again, identifying what you do. So I call it reverse engineering is one of the first sections that this talks about when that tagline, elephants don't bite, mosquitoes do, is a huge piece of that. And you'll hear it referenced a lot through the entire book, right? Second one is we call it interview skills, right? So again, it's teaching you, identify and read your candidate, ask behavioral questions to identify who's sitting in front of you, not by your standard, what I call HR questions. HR friendly, but it's going to actually be a lot more behavioral. And I utilized a lot of my wife's teaching. She does with the behavioral science of her from her trades. And not to mention figuring out how we can identify the strength. So we know we're hiring for not only, to fill the position with the highest candidate we can find, but also we teach you why in that same section, how hiring for culture is predictable. Right? Because if you can actually hire for culture and you can have predictable result, then suddenly it's like I don't have to guess if they're going to fit or not. So
So
there's areas in there.
give me an example of behavioral questions.
Love it. All right. So a behavioral question be like this. So when I ask you, here's one of my favorites, right? So Rich, real fast, if you had a job on your resume here that you could erase, which one would that be?
Okay. I don't have a resume,
Well,
so I can't tell you, but it's a good question.
so the reason
And
why that say then we would say this. Great. So who was your leader over there? Who was your manager? It was Jonathan. Cool. Well, when I call Jonathan and I ask him what's your strengths are, what's he going to tell me? XYZ. Cool. Now, when I call and ask him what your weaknesses or areas of opportunity or what you needed to work on, what's he going to tell me there? Now, suddenly he feels like I'm going to contact so I get the truth, right?
yeah, you can't
Then what
BS your
we
way out of this conversation.
no, nope, nope. Then one other one I'll give you. Well, there's two fun ones, right? This is Joseph Downey's favorite one. He says, mine is, hey, what's your highest verifiable income? Right? What's your highest verifiable income? And in sales, people want to talk about how much they want, but you add the word verifiable, you get the truth. Right. And when the truth comes out, dude, you really see their eyes light up when you say the word verifiable, because I think you're going to ask for proof. Right. And not give it away, but I really don't care about the proof, but it's the nature of the beast to get them on their thing. The other fun one is, say, Rich, if you had a position on your resume here that you call your ace, the one that you call your career hanging move, you hang your hat on that career move here. What one on your resume is that? And they're generally to point one. I'm like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. So tell me about it real quick. On a level of 1 to 10, the 10 being you were the absolute best rep they had, 5 you were middle of the pack, and 1 you just weren't any good. I know you're not going to tell me 1 or 5. So where were you at? Oh, I was probably 9 or 10. Awesome. So you just remember what your presentation was you did there? Yeah, I bet you probably still remember in your sleep, right? And you told me you're one of the best. All right, cool. Well, guess what? Do you like to play games? I do too. So then we go, I say, okay, cool. I'm the homeowner, or I'm the customer. You're the rep. Sell me on that. And what I'm trying to see there is you're trying to see if they come alive. And if they come alive, you get to see the real person sitting in front of you and how they orchestrate with, mirroring, pitch, basically inflection. And I like who I'm sitting in front of me. Now I've taken them for a test drive. So I know really what I'm getting if I brought them on. If they're dull, basically lackluster, non-enchanting,
Not
I don't bring
confident.
them on. Yeah, yeah. So again, you can see a lot of that stuff right in front of you on that. And then the other section of the book, which is what I call class 401, is I give you a diagram teaching you how to read eyes, right? To tell if someone's visual, audio, kinesthetic learner, and how that relates in reference to how you hire and why it's important.
Okay. I mean, I remember I first encountered this whole thing, neuro linguistic programming, I think is what you're talking about,
Yep.
NLP. This goes all the way back to Tony Robbins' very
Yeah.
first book, Unleashed. No, not that one. Unlimited Power.
Yeah.
And then the next one was Unleash the Giant Within or something like that. Uh, I got very interested. This is like in the 80s. This stuff goes back, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
But true
Well,
principles.
that's exactly what it is NLP. It's
Yeah.
because I took a course of it. I got bored in the industry. I got my like as I call it the 10-year mark or the 9-year itch, right? You got into that part. And
I'm marrying you right
uh
now just for fun. No, I'm just
I
kidding. Keep
know.
going.
There we go. I like it. Keep it up. But but I took a course, right, on how to like to be an NLP practitioner. So I studied because the guy that I ran into, he studied NLP and I couldn't figure out why he was getting the results he was getting. And I'm like, what? So I ended up taking this course, right? Found out later Tony did it, that was Tony's game too. But I wanted to learn everything about it, right? With the really why it was with pacing, basic labeling, a lot of the things that you'll see like FBI type stuff doing. So I started figuring out like, just like mirroring, right? Some people call it like this, but you can repeat back the last three words someone says, you can open them up, right? So there's so many different little techniques and tricks. But when you start reading the eyes, the most important thing is, if you study NLP, is you got to find a baseline, right? I can't until I find someone's baseline. I can't tell you that you're creating or you're visualizing or you're an auditory learner or auditory creation or basically internal dialoguing. I got to find your baseline first. And once I find your baseline, it's crazy. You want a fun thing? How many different ways do people tell the truth? Have any clue?
No,
One. How many different ways do people lie?
I would assume it's a lot.
Yeah, thousands, if not millions, right? So again, when
Are
they
you
find a
now,
baseline,
hold on. Are you talking about facial expressions, eye movements? What are you talking about specifically?
it's your body motion, your eyes. When you watch something, you tell something because like how you get to start it out is, hey, what's your birthday? Not your birthday. If I was basing an interview onto, hey, what do you love to do? So cool. So you're a baseball player. What kind of bat did you use? Cool. Tell me about that. Why'd you like that so much? And then I'm watching you tell me certain specific things. And where are you from again? Okay, and you said
Okay, so
that's where?
you're like calibrating the lie detector machine here by
Absolutely.
asking questions that are true.
Yeah, because I want to know but what I'm doing is I'm seeing if there's a rhythm and a behavior, right? And that's one of the things that the book gets into is teaching you some of that behavioral stuff that you can get into so you can really feel like who you have if they're trustworthy or what in front of you. Now it takes an art. Joseph was talking about the other day because I take that chart and I save it as a screensaver. So when I'm interviewing people, I'm looking at it. He goes, it's crazy to see just the differences on how accurate that is. It's amazing, right? So the cool thing is that human nature, humans are kind of predictable. So again, if we can find how to predict an outcome as close as we can, there's no such thing as a perfect science, right? Just like medicine, the only thing that's absolute is there's no absolute.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we can figure out who we have sitting in front of us. So we know if we made a good or bad decision, at least on day one, or at least mitigate that risk, right? Because
So
fast forward back to the end, think about it. If you had three bad hires, and let's say you're closer to that $300,000 mark, right? That's nearly $1 million burnt for every three bad hires, right? So think about what that looks like in the EBITDA column of your business, right?
So is the book Dumb Tax, is it home improvement specific or is it relevant for any manager hiring any kind of job?
Well, pretty much any manager hiring any job can use it, but it's written specifically for the home remodeling industry, right? So that was kind of the avenue where the target client was helping people in our industry. But I've actually had a buddy of mine works in the NFL. He's an agent. He's utilized it and read it. He actually wrote a forward on the back of the book right there as well. So just really you can utilize it about any business or any industry you're in if you have sales representatives you're hiring. You you can really use it in almost any variable. It works, but for this specific one's written for sales professionals in our industry.
Okay, and I'm assuming that you go into a lot of NLP principles without not necessarily labeling them as such.
Yep. Yeah, it's
Okay,
got a lot of storyline. It's got a lot, it's very, I've been told by people that have read it, it's very direct and to the point, not a lot of fluff, right? There's storytelling in it, but it's not just a story. You're not reading a story like you would a normally like fiction or a
yep, yep, yep.
novel. It's bullet points, and then each section has a takeaway and a workbook at the end of it. So again, you have to work on yourself,
How does it
right?
work if
See
you're
that
how does it work if you're using the Audible version?
You just go to the dumbtax.org website, download your free workbook, and it
Okay, so there's a PDF
allows
you
you to
can
have
get.
it there too. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, dumbtax.org.
Dumbtax.org. Yes, sir.
Okay, so go find this book, Dumb Tax. The subtitle, I believe, was Find Your Why for Hiring, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is that a nod to Simon Sinek?
No, it was we can give him credit for it, but it was not meant to be the find the why. I mean, it was really trying to find the reason why you hire, right? So it was yes, it stems similar off of that. And I give him credit because that was one heck of a book. But again, it rolls down the same type of evolution where if you don't know why you do it, then you don't know why you're executing. Just like if
Okay.
you don't know why you're in business, you don't have clarity.
Be more charismatic. No. Let's
Yeah,
figure out exactly what that means. Okay, amazing, Dustin. Great stuff. Look, here's the real sign of whether or not the interview was successful or not on this podcast. I'm gonna go get this book.
okay.
We're kind of in a mode of our company right now of scaling and growing, and hiring is we've had a recent bad experience hiring that I've got a little pain point around that's making me want to go, okay, I'm gonna check this out. I'm not gonna check it out. I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna listen to it. I'm an audio guy.
Okay, love it.
Okay, well, anything else that you want to share with us? I'll give you the last word here.
No, I think on it again. Just remember, elephants don't bite, mosquitoes do. Right? Again, it's not the big things in business that get you; it's the small. And dumb tax was written to stand for the price you pay for bad business decisions. Right? And I'll say one last thing, since you're giving me the floor. It's great day rules, and we're gonna take over the whole country. That's it.
I am aware of this. This has been made very clear to me in the last 6 months that something called Great Day is about to take over. Well, I wish you a lot of success in what I know is one of your major initiatives, which is to create this umbrella brand of Great Day so that you've got an ecosystem for all of your customers to cross sell and upsell and sideways sell and however you want to say it. So I have no doubt that with you and the others that are leading that company, that's going to be a great success. So thanks for joining us today. Look forward to talking to you again in the future and meeting you at an upcoming event that we'll both be at.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll see you.
Thanks.